Now, as you might remember from some of my videos back then, going into the book of Boba Fett, I was rather confident that we were going to get something pretty awesome to behold. I thought after how good the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian were, that Favreau, Filoni, and Robert Rodriguez would of course deliver with this one. I thought that they'd get this character right and that we would finally see on screen the Boba Fett or the kind of action from him that we'd only been able to imagine or perhaps read about since his first appearance back in The Empire Strikes Back. Or maybe I should say we'd get to see a lot more of the Boba Fett we'd gotten a glimpse of in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, where he used a gaffy stick to deal out some pretty brutal punishment to some stormtroopers, among other cool things. In fact, I wasn't really hoping for or asking for too much more than just that. Too much more than just an angry Boba Fett angry after getting out of the Sarlacc pit and finally getting off of Tatooine. And he was going to go around the galaxy and slave one and get some revenge on anyone and everyone who had ever wronged him. And along the way, he'd reestablish himself as the best bounty hunter there is, as well as putting the galaxy on notice that he was taking over Jabba's throne. That was more or less all I really wanted from the series, all it really needed to be in order to resonate and to be a hit with myself and probably most fans. And that's coming from someone who always likes to say that substance is more important than spectacle, someone who always wants to see the story put first and foremost. But in this particular case, with this particular character and setting, I would have been okay with something that maybe wasn't the most profound story ever, and instead just focused on the action and then, shall we say, the cool nature of the character. I wanted this to finally be, again, the look at Boba Fett so many of us had imagined for so very long. Plain and simple, I just wanted to see him be a badass. And though, sure, there were some good things in regards to the series, I did end up liking a lot of the stuff with the Tuskens, for example. But it was very telling of just how much the show had failed the character, when a lot of people seem to agree that the best 2 episodes of the series were the 5th and 6th episodes. You know, the episodes that didn't really even have Boba Fett in them. Another issue with it that a lot of fans seem to have is that he was ruling with or showing a little bit too much respect and, again, not being badass enough. And apparently this is something that Tamora Morrison, who of course plays Boba Fett in the series, something that he even agrees with, recently saying this in an interview with Entertainment Tonight. We've got to bring him back somehow. We've got to see the old Boba Fett. We reintroduced him, we found out some stuff, but I think it's time to get him back to his badass ways. No 2 ways around that. So I think we sort of have that scope to go back there, but that's out of my control. I'll just see what happens. And first of all here, I do always love and appreciate when actors truly do seem to care about their characters and really get into the story and really care about what the fans want to see. And in this case, Morrison seems to truly care about Boba Fett and seems to be, like a lot of fans, a little disappointed in the outcome of the Book of Boba Fett, or that the character and or the series wasn't what most fans or he himself wanted or expected out of it. Again, I think a lot of fans, as well as Morrison himself, just expected Boba Fett to be more badass overall, which isn't to say he didn't do anything of that sort in the series. He does do things like blow someone up with a rocket and he rides a Rancor after all. So he does do cool things, yes. But I think in general, just more of that sort of thing was what we expected. And that there'd be a lot less walking around and taking his helmet off and talking to everyone. And actually, all that talking was another thing Morrison wasn't happy with and tried to have changed. He thought Boba Fett was saying way too much. He was even always trying to give his lines to Ming-Na Wen, who played Fennec Shand. He thought Boba Fett should be a man of few words, which I do agree with, and is the impression I think most of us get from The Empire Strikes Back. However, the problem with all that, with Boba Fett leaving his helmet on, having very little to say, and being more about action than negotiation, was we'd recently got a character who does or is all of those things, that of course being Din Djarin or the Mandalorian. And if I had to make a guess, I'd imagine one of the reasons why they chose to do what they did with Boba Fett in his series, why they didn't make him the man of few words badass most expected, was because they didn't want it to be too much like the Mandalorian, or for him to be too much like Din Djarin, and to make the shows, feel too similar. Even though you can certainly argue Mando only starts out that way in his series, starts out very similar to how you'd honestly expect Boba Fett to be, I've even said before, and have heard others echo the sentiment, that Din Djarin in The Mandalorian is far more like Boba Fett, or more what fans expect from Boba Fett, than Boba himself was in his own series. And though, like I was just saying, Mando only starts out that way, starts out feeling like a very cold and uncaring bounty hunter, that he is only out for himself, and then rather quickly starts to experience a type of change thanks to, of course, Grogu, the fact that he remains a man of few words, one who never or very rarely takes off his helmet, and seems to prefer action over negotiation as the best solution to most problems, well, that helps make it feel like he hasn't changed entirely, or honestly much at all. He never ever, despite Grogu, loses that type of edge or badassness to him. He never feels like he's gone even close to completely soft. It feels like the only thing that has really changed about him is he now cares about Grogu along with what he's always cared primarily about, which is the way, or his Mandalorian culture. It's not that Grogu has completely changed him or his priorities, or that he suddenly cares about anything and everything else beyond him. It's just that he now cares about Grogu along with that and wants to see him become a part of this other extremely important thing in his life. He wants Grogu to be a Mandalorian like him, and thus the change to Mando isn't really a change at all. Instead, he's only added something to his character and had nothing taken away. This is how or why Din Djarin maintains his badassness despite hauling around a cute little green Yoda creature. However, for better or worse, after the Tusken experience on Tatooine, Boba Fett feels like a completely different person or character. Instead of that experience adding to who he once was, like Grogu did for Mando, or expanding him, instead of him maybe wanting to go and rule and take Jabba's throne for himself and his own gain, or because he's tired of working for fools and he thinks he can do a better job if he's running the show and make a lot of credits along the way, he's doing it because he suddenly cares about the people of Tatooine and Mos Espa in particular, even though they've never cared about the Tuskens that are the catalyst for his change in the first place. He also wants to rule with respect, unlike Jabba before him, for the sake of other bounty hunters besides himself, because why exactly? Does he think there will ever come a day when most bounty hunters care about anything more than the credits they earn, and the same goes for those hiring them? Does he honestly think he's going to change the whole system, especially when he gets proven wrong and betrayed in the series itself? Basically, what I'm saying here is the Book of Boba Fett doesn't add anything to the character. It turns him into something else entirely. He feels little to nothing like we'd always imagined him to be, which is another part of the problem here. Because, sure, stories where characters go through something profound and become someone or something else can be very good. Heck, most stories involve some type of change or growth for the character. Most will have some type of transformative arc. We pretty much expect a story to do something like that. We pretty much expect some character growth in any story. But in this particular case, the case of Boba Fett, we'd never actually really seen him be the badass bounty hunter most of us think of him or just expect him to be. We'd never really gotten to see that Boba Fett before he's changed away from it. And we feel robbed that we didn't get that part of his story, that we didn't get to see what we all wanted to see first, Boba Fett being the badass bounty hunter he's implied to be in The Empire Strikes Back. And instead, we only get the transformation into something else entirely, mainly done because, or again, so I'd guess, because he'd be too similar to Din Djarin. They didn't want another character who didn't talk all that much and kept his helmet on all the time, even though Boba always taking it off and talking too much just amplifies all these changes in him. It only makes him feel even more different than what we expected him to be. In other words, before we got to see the Boba Fett we all wanted to see, instead of a story that adds to the character we expected him to be, we got one that completely changes him, that takes all the things we love or wanted to love about Boba Fett, it takes them away from us before we ever got anything more than a sampling of them in The Empire Strikes Back. And so the question here then becomes, can Boba Fett be saved, as Tamora Morrison seems to want for the character? Can we get him back to his badass ways? And the answer to that is, sure, I think we can. His current ways, his ruling with respect and trying to be a good leader to the people of Mos Espa, just needs to backfire on him. He needs to be betrayed in a way that cuts him deep and makes him want to go back to his old ways. And I think the best way to do that is to be betrayed by Fennec Shand. And in all reality, there are certainly times or moments in the series where she seems to want to do just that, where she questions Boba and his ways and wants to go back to the old-fashioned way of doing things. Now, would Lucasfilm and Disney actually do that? And would the fans care at this point if they do? Or are fans maybe hoping they just leave Boba Fett alone from here on out, that the damage is done and anything else would only make it worse? Well, who knows the answer to all those questions. But something tells me, whether you like it or not, we almost certainly will see Boba Fett again. The only question then is, Will he once again be the badass we all want and expect him to be? Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all this. Is the reason they did what they did the fault of the Mandalorian? Were they afraid they would be too similar? Or was it something else entirely that went wrong? Whatever you think, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.